I'm giving you my undivided attention here.
Hi, everyone joining us. We're just going to give it a moment to let everyone else join. If you're just joining us now, we'll get started in a moment. Hello, everyone. Welcome and good evening. Thanks for joining us virtually tonight. My name is Maddie Walters, and on behalf of Harvard Bookstore, I'm pleased to introduce this virtual event with Susan Minot, presenting her new book, Why I Don't Write, in conversation with Amy Hempel. Through virtual events like tonight, Harvard Bookstore continues to bring authors and their work to you and others in our community during these challenging times. Every week, we're hosting events here on our Zoom, and as always, our event schedule appears on our website at harvard.com/events, where you can also sign up for our weekly email newsletter and browse our shelves from home. This evening's discussion will conclude with some time for your questions. If you have a question for our speakers at any time tonight, go to the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen, and we'll get through as many as we can. In the chat box during this presentation, you'll see a link to purchase tonight's book online. And I'm very excited to share that there's a limited number of signed copies available for purchase. All sales through this link support Harvard Bookstore, so thank you for your support during this trying time for community spaces like your local bookstores. You will also find a link to donate in the chat box. Your purchases and contributions make this virtual author series possible, and now more than ever supports the future of a landmark independent bookstore. Thank you for tuning in support of our authors and the incredible staff of booksellers at Harvard Bookstore. We sincerely appreciate your support now and always. And finally, as you may have experienced in virtual gatherings over these last few months, technical issues may arise. If they do, we'll do our best to resolve them quickly. Thank you for your patience and understanding. And now I'm so pleased to introduce tonight's speakers. Susan Minot is an award-winning author who writes novels, short fiction, poetry, and screenplays. Her story, Hiding, received a Pushcart Prize, and her first novel, Monkeys, won the Prix Féminin Étranger in France, and I'm sorry for butchering the French. Her work has appeared in The New Yorker, The Paris Review, Kenyon Review, Fiction, and more. Amy Hempel teaches in the graduate writing program at Bennington College and at Stony Brook, Southampton. She is the author of The Dog of the Marriage, Tumble Home, At the Gates of the Animal Kingdom, and Reasons to Live. She is a recipient of the PEN/Malamud Award, the Ray Award for Short Story, and the Ambassador Book Award for Fiction, among other honors. Tonight, they'll be discussing Susan's new collection, Why I Don't Write, and Other Stories. I could go on about the praise for this book, but I think the New York Times put it best, remarking that after 30 years away from the short story, it is good to have her back, clear-eyed and fearless as ever. I am so pleased to turn things over to tonight's speakers. Susan and Amy, the digital podium is all yours.
Thank you, Maddie.
Thank you, Maddie. Hi, Susan.
Hello, Amy.
I would like to welcome everyone who's joining. And first, I would like to congratulate Susan again on this stunningly good collection. It is just first rate. And there's the kitten coming in.
There are a couple of them, so forgive me.
Yeah. Susan is in Maine. I am in Florida. Maddie, who introduced us, is in New Hampshire. We can't see where you all are, but I'm guessing you're all over the place. It's nice to be able to do it this way, to talk this way. To begin, Susan's going to read just a little bit from, I think, 3 different stories, and then we're going to, I'm going to ask her some questions.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Amy, for doing this.
My pleasure.
Amy's an old friend. I think I probably was a fan before a friend.
Likewise.
I feel honored to have, and it's a good excuse to be able to see you. We were talking before about how there's a howling wind around my house here on an island, and Amy's sort of in the path of a hurricane with thunderstorms and stuff. So if we suddenly black out, that will be why, but don't give up. We'll try to come back. So very nice to have you here. I don't know, what do you say? That very nice that you're out there, I guess.
So
I'm going to read first from the first story. The stories in the book are quite different, and they were written over a long period of time. And I hadn't really planned on, as I was writing the stories, I wasn't thinking of them as going into a collection the way I had for my last book. But then as these things happened, they sort of gathered together, and I had some old stories, and then this happened. So this is from the first story. It's set in East Africa in Kenya, and it's called Pole Pole, which is a Swahili expression that means, either sort of take it easy or poor thing, you've hurt yourself. And it's a story of, among other things, one night stand. Daisy is an American documentary filmmaker who has just spent a night with a journalist she met, and she finds out in the morning, he lives in Nairobi, that he's married with children, which is something she hadn't really bothered to ask him. And now this part of the story is she's had quite a nice night with him, but now she's not quite sure where she stands. She has met two of the people who work for him, Africans, and she sees the woman named Cecily again, who lives in a little house nearby. Daisy stood waiting next to the Jeep in the driveway. Through the front window of the cottage, she could see the man on the telephone with his back to her, facing the wall. Talking to the wife, she figured. It was bright outside, and she was without sunglasses. She strolled off to be out of sight of the man, scuffing the ground. Many footprints had distressed the dirt. Suddenly, she felt exhausted. For a moment, she was back in the bed with the man. He was holding her wrist. She felt swept up again, and it ran through her body. Sex was like that. Not all of you came back right away. Part of you lingered with the person, not unhappily. It was nice to be relieved of yourself, though eventually that part would return. She had moved into the shade near Edmund's house. The one door was open to a turquoise painted wall. There was thin grass in the front yard and a small circle of charred wood. Against the ochre wash of the house sat two white molded plastic chairs. A small child appeared in the doorway, wearing a pink sleeveless dress with ruffles at the shoulders and eating a papaya. She eyed Daisy. Daisy smiled and said, "Habari?" The girl's eyes widened, and she looked behind her for instruction, then stared back at Daisy. Cecily appeared behind the little girl, carrying something, shooing her out of the door. Her arms were straining under the weight of the large gray tub. Cecily hauled the tub to the end of the yard near some scarlet hibiscus and tossed the water out. It floated in the air like a mirror, then came down flat and made a circle of puff in the dirt. Cecily turned around and looked at her, a white woman standing on the tan drive in her tan skirt. Daisy waved and smiled and started to step back. She rocked on her sandals. Cecily came forward a few steps and stopped. Her smooth, solid face was not smiling. At first, Daisy thought she was getting some version of the cold stare, the look of disapproval any girl might get stumbling out of the man's cottage, probably one in a series of aimless girls. But when Cecily lifted her hand to shield her eyes from the sun, Daisy saw a different expression. She was looking at Daisy with pity. I'm going to read a little bit from the title story, which is obviously ironic why I don't write, and yet it's a story. And it's a very impressionistic story. It's little, basically lines drifting through the mind of a writer, and they're things that are keeping her from writing ostensibly, though some of them maybe are more interesting than what she's writing about, so she'd rather think about that, or they're distracting her, or they're a worry, or they're a philosophical question that's stopping her. So it ends out, it's the dream she had the night before. Before waking, I found a deep slash in my upper arm. Out of the opening floated small lobsters. What should we have for dinner? More eggs. All day you ask yourself, what are you doing all day? 53 dead, not including the shooter. Are you going to the march? That's not what the fire marshal said. I walk around the city and listen to people as I pass them on sidewalks. Usually they are talking on their phones. Often they are not looking at where they are going. They are looking into their palms. Payment details, tuition total, balance due. Caring used to have a ragged pain, sometimes wafty, sometimes sharp as needles. Its magnet weight kept me connected. The keys have to be replaced. I haven't seen him in over 20 years. An hour ago, I felt calm. Now I am heartbroken with worry. Is it the dentist? Is it the daughter's distress? Is it death? Come to bed. Open any page of Emily Dickinson and have the top of your head taken off. No one saying, come to bed. It was hard to explain, so I gave up. He got another one, prettier, younger. A child watches his dad lose patience, the look in the child's eye. You're a woman. Why would you think that? What's going on with this cold, with this heat, with this rain? He slept on his side near the bank vent, or was it a she? The impact killed her instantly. Sorry, I have other plans. You write, if without it, you would die. And then I'm going to just read one more of a different, sort of a whole different thing. It's from a short story called Occupied, and it's a woman who's an artist. She's a single mom, and she's on her way back from her studio to get the babysitter who's looking after her son. And she decides to stop at Zuccotti Park, where the protesters have been camped out for a few weeks. And she, in another lifetime, had been a sort of protester herself, but now with a child, she doesn't really have time to do it. So she goes to visit, but remembers 9 years before, because she's downtown in Manhattan, of the having been in Washington Square Park on the morning of 9/11 and seeing the towers go down. So this is her remembering that, something that's kind of hard to write about. I avoided writing about it for a long time. So this is just folded into another story. Then someone at a bus stop, everyone stood staring, said a plane had hit the Pentagon, and on the strangely trafficless Lafayette Street, dark figures hurried away from the mayhem. Men in dark suits with briefcases and women in skirts walked rapidly uptown, stiff-kneed. When they passed by, she saw their backs. From their heads down to their legs was powdered white. Later, drifting to Washington Square, she stood among milling people facing down West Broadway to one of the towers now engulfed in white smoke. Strangers muttered to one another, astonished. How many people did the building hold? How many floors were, when in an instant, the tower in front of them dropped like a souffle, vanishing before their eyes. A moan rose from the crowd. People stood frozen, then turned. They looked away, they looked back, they didn't move. The vision had been very like a hallucination. You could not believe what you were seeing. That was the phrase everyone kept using. They couldn't believe what they had seen. Her brain immediately registered the otherworldliness of the seconds. The image entered, and she was aware in that instant that it would never leave her. Out of the thousands of images which the city eventually gathered and posted and printed and beamed from that morning, none she saw had been from the precise place where she stood watching as her knees buckled, dropping as the building dropped. That was one time when what was in front of her was far greater in intensity than what she saw depicted after. Not like the park in front of her now, more puny than in the pictures. On that Tuesday morning, she felt that as a witness, she was a kind of custodian of the deaths. It sounded self-aggrandizing, so she never admitted the feeling, but she had taken it inside her, the obligation. But really, what kind of custodian could one be of such a thing, and what could one do with it? The sun was no longer visible in the park, having dropped behind the buildings. She wondered now, as she paced down the sidewalk slope, how many people had actually witnessed it, the murder of thousands of people, and how many others kept that vision inside them and felt, as she did, to be a guardian of it.
Thank you so much, Susan. You just read parts that I have dog-eared and drawn hearts around in my copy. I feel like the questions I have should all be asked at the exact same time. So bear with me if I leap around a bit. The title story, obviously you wrote it pre-pandemic, but it is a perfect pandemic story in that virtually everything conspires to take our attention away. In this case, from the person trying to write a story, but whatever we're doing, I mean, it's virtually impossible to just stay on track. So I wondered also, at what point did you know that was going to be the title of the book? When you had everything, or when you wrote that story?
Actually, when I wrote that story, so it's quite different than the other stories, sort of narratively, and it's more impressionistic. And one person said, I really like that poem you wrote. It's sort of more like a poem in its form, except that it's longer. And I think I felt after finishing that story that it was I was moving into kind of a different arena somehow, just in its form. And so I felt kind of excited by it. I thought that it was getting at a lot of different things. And as you say, with the pandemic, I mean, a writer isn't unlike people under being forced to stay at home. That's part of, as you know, what we make ourselves do. Don't go out and interact with people for obviously a different reason, but because it's distracting and you're not going to be able to sort of concentrate. But now in this day and age, not that in another age one couldn't get distracted, but we have with our phones and computers just, the phrase "at your fingertips" never was more appropriate. It's literally at your and sort of fingertips that don't even know what they're doing, and the rabbit hole, analogy is pretty good, though I think it's deeper than that we go. And a rabbit hole makes it seem much more natural and than it is. It's almost like going into, arteries of the earth and into deeper and deeper darkness as we so it's an added problem, and this fragmentary thing. So I thought, okay, that is and how I'm sure you've been asked to write an essay about why I write, and writers often are, and it's something that I read with great interest because I'm interested to see why writers write, because often it's, every writer we share things in common, but we're just different personalities and people have different reasons for writing. So it's always very interesting to see, but I thought, well, there are just as many reasons why we don't write. So, the title was there early on, and then it snowballed. I mean, I could have written it forever, obviously.
I had that feeling. I had that feeling that
it would have been too much, right? You couldn't keep on doing that for a whole book or something. I mean, I could have, but who would want to read it?
I think you got it right. Our mutual friend, the novelist Nancy Lemon, once wrote, "A place is different when you love someone in it." Mm. And I thought of that reading this book, several of the stories in particular, and I thought of it in Pole Pole, if I'm saying that correctly.
Yep, that's it.
A sample just now. It's not so much that the woman, the young woman who's there in Kenya is in love with this man. She's really just met him, but she is, and here's a nod to an earlier book, in lust, if you will. There's lust there. So a place is different when you lust for someone. And
that just as true. Yeah.
And there's another thing I was thinking of that I'm just hitting things, several things that
I've forgotten that Nancy said that. It's so good.
And it fits a lot of what you do. And I'm really remarking things that I'm especially filled with admiration for. And another one, I meant to say, well, I am doing that, but I did feel that when you're in a different place, that is not your own place, things can happen. Obviously, things happen that are unexpected, but the woman doesn't see what's coming from the local person. She does not expect the particular judgment, and I won't say more about it because it's there in the story. But I think that there's an innocence that gets sacrificed, and perhaps expectations of being welcomed that can be overturned in a different place. And this was so
Definitely.
subtly done. It was in Pole Pole, and it's the savage moment when it comes. And you know that this woman is changed, and it's really quite remarkable. So that's more a comment than question. So let me ask you a genuine question. One of the other things I'm very keen on in your work is that you have a really strong ability to navigate that line between vulnerability and victim. So I think vulnerability in a character is wonderful. You know, it's appealing. It's human. Victims we don't love on the page, and maybe off the page as well. But you move very, very carefully and very confidently when you're portraying people who are vulnerable. And yet there is a story here. You didn't read from it. It's Boston Common at Twilight, in which a 15-year-old boy, in Boston on a Christmas vacation, decides to go buy some pots. You can get some pot in Boston Common. And it's an absolutely terrifying story of somebody vulnerable crossing over into becoming a victim. And it is, I just want to hear you say something about navigating that, because it is a truly terrifying story. It's almost unbearable to read.
Well, I wanted to write about how sort of when one is terrified and young, one isn't quite sure about which instinct to follow, right? So sometimes your self-preserving instinct, that would be, if someone does something creepy, you just go the other way. There's a certain age, and this boy's in adolescence, he thinks he's kind of doing something grown up, and then it starts to sort of go wrong, but he doesn't. And I think this is true about people. People would rather, have their throats slit than be humiliated sometimes, right? So, I mean, that may be a harsh thing to say, but that, they're willing to put themselves in a dangerous position rather than say, wait, I don't know what's going on here. So staying vulnerable, because that means you stay vulnerable, right? And we are not, there's nothing in our, I will say, in our culture, in our country certainly, that admires vulnerability, which one should admire. It's a tender part of ourselves that is usually quite earnest and quite, maybe even idealistic a little bit, right? But it is not promoted. It's like you should be tough. And, I don't know if you said this once, but I remember once we were talking about female characters, and it was like the tough female character getting to, and, I think either you said it or we were just agreeing how, wouldn't it be nice to see a not tough female character, like in a sort of powerful position, who's like having trouble sort of managing things, because isn't, not that that's what women are like, but that's part of every human being, right? To feel like I can't manage. And it's something that, I think I found in literature very early on, to see other people's vulnerabilities that were sort of have to be hidden out in the world. It was it was an eye-opening connection to think, oh, okay, so that is real and true, and
Oh,
maybe
yeah.
something to pay attention.
Yeah. I mean, it always interests me on the page, vulnerability. I don't see it as
Mhm.
something to avoid. Something else that always interests me, I think there's always a story where power shifts between two people, whether it's, paramours or parent and child or friends. And there's a story in here, Green Glass, which was first published in the Atlantic, I think, Atlantic Monthly.
Long time ago. I think 91, maybe.
Really? Wow. But it's a
Yeah.
couple. Uh,
Well, that's eternal, right?
yes, it is.
You'll notice they don't have any cell phones or anything, right?
It's a couple at a wedding, and it's mostly in dialogue. And they're jealous of an ex of the man is going to be at the wedding, and you change their positions. First, the man has the power, it seems, because the woman is quite rattled that his ex will be there, and apparently she's quite something, or she imagines that she's quite something. And then there's a very interesting turn, and I don't want to be too specific and give it away, but the power between them shifts. So
That's interesting. You think of it as power. I never thought of it as power.
what'd you think of it?
When someone's I was just thinking, so one's jealous, and then a person sort of appears that the man can be jealous of, right? But
Right.
I was really looking more at, how, how a person behaves when they're jealous, which is
Mm-hmm.
usually pretty insanely,
Yeah.
and it often is, it's an attitude to have,
Yes.
and we see, the woman having it at first,
Mm-hmm.
and then it's like, well, what's that going to look like when it's on him? So I was sort of thinking of it that way. Maybe they're both, but I guess that's true with a person has the power who's not jealous, like you've got the upper hand.
I think by power, a better way of explaining how I read that story and why the word power came to mind, it seemed to me that the person who's not jealous has a kind of freedom from jealousy, and freedom from perturbation.
No question.
And that, to me, seemed like that freedom seemed like a kind of power to me as I read your story.
Yes, definitely.
I was thrilled when you turned it on its head.
It's all in, I can't remember where I was just reading a story with my class, and the comment was, it's so interesting, like nothing has changed in the story. It's just some information gets exchanged and suddenly the whole world looks different.
Yeah.
Like and in this case, it's just an attitude.
Mm-hmm.
Your attitude changes and the whole world looks different. So that was one of the reasons for the title, because it's like, if you're jealous, you're looking through, the sort of classic green glass things.
Right. And a number of your stories, that one included, made me think of another place. I think it's always, that is always a good source of story. And that's when one's illusion or one's fantasy collides with reality. You do that very well.
Well, there can be a lot of, one's way of sort of telling oneself one story runs up against, not just reality, but surprise and change and chance constantly. I mean, that's what life is really. And it's quite amazing how we carry on in our days as if, oh my God, this thing happened. Like, what a surprise. As if that's not the regular
Right.
mode of things, which is absolutely change. We should be amazed that like today was like yesterday. It's amazing,
Mm.
That's the amazing thing.
That's the amazing thing. There's a story I want to ask you about. It's again, it's extremely uncomfortable to read, and that is a high compliment. Please take it as high
I hope it's
compliment.
uncomfortable and yet you feel happy in it. That's
I'm glad to
it's the
feel it.
fine line I try to keep.
Yes, no, but I mean, I'm glad to be made
Yeah.
so uncomfortable, and it's very disquieting, and that is the language of cats and dogs. And you in Occupied, which you read from tonight, there was a movement that entered your story, the Occupy movement, and what enters this story, though not named, I think, is the Me Too phenomenon. And in this story, there's a woman who recalls a preposterous overture made to her 40 years earlier by a formerly respected professor at a time of, again, great vulnerability. This college, she's about to graduate, this college girl's mother has very recently died. And
she's actually, by the way, she's from another book of mine. She's from my first book,
no
Monkeys.
what?
And her name is Sophie Vincent. Yeah. And so it's like
What's familiar?
It's like an outtake from like it's not even Sophie Vincent a few years later. It's actually in the same time frame of the book, but
that's so interesting.
Yeah.
That's so interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So this at a terrible time in her life, this professor hits on her in a crazy way, and there's great ensuing ugliness on his part, and I'm just going to read a paragraph or so. It's fun to read aloud something you would have been happy to write yourself. So this is from the young woman's point of view, 40 years later. You think you are done with an experience once it is over and it is set into some version in a story, and there it will sit. But if you return to the experience many years later, urged by a movement in the culture to re-examine the treatment of women, an examination which seemed to come every 50 years or so and then go, you might discover new details waiting there untouched. And she goes on to note that in a way, these moments, these charged moments that they're almost out of body experiences. They're so rattling that you continue, you spend time with them over the years. Every time it occurs to you and you think of something else about it, oh, that's maybe another half hour, there's an hour there, and that it just keeps, it's like a shape-shifting experience. And I thought that was so deft, the way you made a nod to the movement that would, of course it would, remind any woman of something like this attack. And yet you don't make it trendy. There's an intelligence that isn't trendy in this story, in this revisiting, and it's very strong. And I think it's a story I felt as another writer and as your friend reading it, and I thought, oh God, it would be so easy to step wrong, but you never do, and it doesn't get gooey or anything. it
Well,
just,
what ended up happening in the story, and hopefully this is one thing that it's one of the rewards maybe of writing, is that you set out to write something to sort of explore it a little bit more,
mhm,
and you find yourself um, thinking more in this case, not so much about this professor's treatment of the girl. That's like a fact that can be taken care of in a sentence, but
mhm.
it ends up being an exploration about memory, and
Yeah.
traumatic memory that gets freeze framed, but then
Yes.
you go and try to rattle it, and let's see if what it really looks like again, and you've got a different perspective, and it's 40 years later, it can start to look different. Like,
Oh,
so
yes.
you theoretically can go back, and I can say now, one can go back 40 years. Like, I can, there are a lot of things that now that you didn't know when you were 20. And you could do that with so much of your experience,
Yes.
right? You
Yes.
could, you
Oh my
could
God.
rattle it around, look at it from a different way. And in that way, you know,
Yeah.
uh, an experience in memory turns out to be a, a true experience. Like, you
Mhm.
can discover new things in the rumination, which is kind of wild. You think about it.
It really is. It really is.
I mean, it's endless, is what it
It's
is.
endless.
But
It's endless.
we would think, oh, I mean, Faulkner says the past is not the past. It's not even, but more than that, it could be, I think that the next line after the one that you read, which is actually the one that I always read
Oh,
too out of this story, is
oh,
that
place I can't
what
find it
you do
here.
not know when you're young is that you may, as your life goes on, return to things that happened, and that the more you visit a thing, the more time you spend experiencing it in reflection, in memory, so that an event which took, say, an hour in your life may afterward be recalled and visited by you 50 times over each time you remember it. Moments of happiness, such as the period one fell in love, may be remembered again and again, weeks worth, if it was a really compelling thing to think about.
Uh, nicely done. Nicely done. You got the last word on that. There's something else. I'm not finished with my list of what I particularly admire here, but you do yearning so well. That's another thing. I think yearning powers a number of things that you've done. And another thing, it's easy to step wrong with, but you don't. It would be easy to sort of lapse into sentimentality. Oh, I miss him. I miss him.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And that doesn't happen. But in Occupied, there is that element as well, not in what you read, but in the rest of the story, because this artist who is out taking a look at the people who are set up there in the park, and riding her bike. She thinks she sees somebody that she's still very taken with. It's not him. And we get a little bit of why she so wishes it had been him. And again, it's another story with a very startling ending. I won't ruin for anyone listening. But that yearning is present, and it does power a fair amount of the work. There's an oh God, our dear late friend Gloria um, used a wonderful word. I think it's Welsh, and I won't know how, I can't pronounce it, but it looks like it would be pronounced Hiraeth or something. It's Hiraeth, and I believe it's a special kind of yearning, and I see it in your work. It's like the yearning for something that you never had.
Mm-hmm.
And I noticed that, I noticed, I didn't think I projected, I think I saw it in Occupied, in that moment where she's thinking about that man. And I saw it in Pole Pole. I love saying that, so I'm saying it again.
Now you'll start saying it now that you know how to pronounce it. It's
Now
a
it's
good
like
thing to say to people when they've hurt themselves. Pole, pole. Slow down.
I will. But it's there too. It's that longing almost for something you don't even. It's not like you missed something you had or someone you were with. You long for something you didn't, you have not yet had.
It in many of the stories. It's you know, the narrator feels that what she's longing for can be found literally in her lover's presence, basically.
Yes.
Right? And I'm not sure she's never had it. I think that maybe, and this may be going off from the stories, but I think that there's a power that happens between two people, you know, in sex, certainly, but that is a sort of transcendent moment that can feel so satisfying and so connected to, again, is it to the person? Is it that you're having a connection?
Yeah.
Is it that, you know, if it's with sex, your body is a part of it. You're not thinking too much. You know, there's a good combination, let's face it, between, you know, with the sort of, you know, a happy sexual union. And I think that these characters are sort of want more of that, more of the time. So it ends up looking like it's the man, or it's the love relationship that will give that. You know.
Maybe a more clear way for me to say it is it sometimes seems as though a character yearns for something she or he hasn't yet had with another person, with that person. Perhaps that's more accurate.
Or she thought she had, but it hasn't been established as real.
Yeah, there's that. I'm going to ask you or remark one more thing, and then I would like some help from Maddie in, I see there are 5 questions. I can't call them up, but we will have a few minutes for you to ask questions. So I'll invite Maddie in just a moment. But I just want to end with my comments with, I was recently reading an Alfred Hayes novel from, I don't know, the 1930s or 40s, and the character...
Is it called In Love?
It's not that one. It's a longer, and I, of course, have no head for titles.
That one is so good, though.
The character feels at one point that we never stop making mistakes. We just run out of time in which to make them. And I like the way you treat people who make mistakes. There's no, I don't know. It's just part of their lives. It's almost like a commonplace. And I don't know, some writers I won't name sort of rush to make people pay for their mistakes, what they feel are mistakes, and things come crashing down on them. And I like that in your work and in a lot of these stories, it's just another aspect of personality in a way. You know, we don't die of mistakes. Not always, but so that more of a remark perhaps than a question. But do you think when you're writing a story, when you're bringing characters in, do you ever think, what mistakes has this person made, or what mistakes are about to be made?
I don't know if I think of them as mistakes. I think, what is this person like struggling with? Like, what is that seems to be where I not consciously, like I'm not deciding, interesting, I want to write about. I just end up like sliding to that same place all the time. You know, it's like I'm walking through the woods and it's the same pond that I arrive at, you know. And I I think that I have, so many questions in my mind that, not least of which is, what are we doing here? Why life? Like, how did that happen? It's a pretty, constant thing to wonder about. But then there's so many other things to wonder about that I think I'm more transfixed by that percolating wonder than I am about the way things operate. The way things operate are beyond me. It's like I'm full of wonder. Yes. It's like,
I love that phrase,
so,
percolating wonder. It's just right.
so I'm just percolating wonder. Things are going on out there, and I figure there are plenty of other people, and I look at them with awe and amazement, who can explain how things are working and why people behave this way and stuff. And
Yeah.
I don't know why. So I was just reading a nice quote by Flannery O'Connor, who said that a writer needs to have a certain kind of stupidity
Oh, I
in
like that.
in that she
Yeah.
will stare and stare at something, like,
Mhm.
because it takes a long time. But then she says, but the more you stare at that thing, the more you're going to be describing the world.
Yeah, lovely. On that beautiful note, I'm going to take a back seat to your questions, and I'll turn those over to Maddie, who actually can access them.
Sure.
Okay.
So we have a question from Catherine. It says, it's a little long, so bear with me. Why I don't write? Wow, how many times have I answered that question? I am a new admirer of Susan's work, but I think I've read most of what Amy has published. Susan's new book definitely sounds memoir-ish, at least parts of it, and Amy, much of your work has that quality as well. As writers of memoir-ish pieces, do either of you have a particular reason why you choose to write in the first person versus second or third?
Do you want to take that first, Sue?
Well, I'll take that first. Actually, I think there's only one story in the book that's in first person, actually. And I think, memoir, if we're just going to be, niggling about the term, is by its nature, it means that you're trying to write about something that really happened. Like, that's what a memoir is. To say something sort of autobiographical, like the material comes from your life, I think that would be more appropriate to describe the work. And I started writing when I was sort of a teenager, and I was much more interested in, started writing, it was just sort of writing in a kind of compulsive way. And I tried to write a lot of stories like the writers that I liked, using sort of their material. And, it became pretty clear early on that I wasn't going to be able to sort of describe anything that I didn't have some kind of connection to. Now, that doesn't mean that I needed to be kidnapped by the Lord's Resistance Army in Uganda to write about, as I did, a young woman being held captive by them. But I know what it's like to be a young woman, and I know what it's like to feel powerless, and I know what it's like to be to watch people around you being abused. And so, you use your imagination from the point of what you can kind of get a handle on.
And I'll just add quickly, I agree with the difference between memoir and something somewhat autobiographical. I will often take something that, I will often begin with something that happened to me or one of my brothers or somebody I know very well. And the wonderful magic is that every time I've done that, because I'm open to what it could become, I let the story take over, and it becomes a different thing. And it made me think of, your question made me think of something a friend, Brett Anthony Johnston, has said. Don't, a piece of advice is don't write what you know is true, write what you fear is true. Which is, will take you to interesting places.
Mhm.
Following up on that, Felicia asks, you have tackled the fearful in your work. Is there something you have yet to address?
Oh my God. I mean, yet there's so much I haven't addressed, I'm sure, but like I was saying, I just keep on getting slid down to these same places, and, yearning, memory and death just seem to keep on crowding out, my interest. I do actually, I'm hoping to, I want to try to write like a sort of noir detective-y type, not detective novel, what would you call it? Just like a sort of mystery-ish noir type thing that I haven't done before. So
Please make
yeah,
time.
it's
Do
so
it.
fun. I mean, part of the reason I'm finishing a novel right now that's just taken way too long, and I I feel like I'm going deep and exploring, but I would like to, Amy just said it was, uncomfortable to read. I would like to write something. I've been reading a lot of detective books, and there's something so delicious about them. Like, I would like to write something that doesn't make you too uncomfortable. I mean, I don't mind jarring people a little, but, so that might be a place I can do that.
Yeah. But again, I
Yeah.
like to be made uncomfortable.
Okay, I know.
Just remember.
Well, was it David Foster Wallace who said it's the writer wants to, or he was quoting maybe a writing teacher of his, that the writer should make the distressed, give comfort to the distressed and discomfort to the satisfied.
Oh, I like that too. That's nice. Yeah.
We have one anonymous question. Which of the pieces in this collection surprised you most as you were writing it?
I think that the title story, because it's sort of, I wasn't really planning on it. I keep a lot of, they're just here so I can sort of show them, I keep a lot of notebooks, and I mean, there's just like this crazy, just like a stack, and they're all on, oh, this one is sort of for writing things, and that's sort of for notes, and that's for so I had a lot of these drifting sort of notions just in my notebooks, almost putting them down to clear my mind so I can, address what I'm working on. And so that ended up being, turns out that's material for a story, the things that that are distracting you, right? So that surprised me. Yeah.
Thank you. Then we had two similar questions, and it is one that I like to usually end on, so I'm going to combine them. What have you both been reading lately?
Do you want to go, Amy?
Sure. I have been reading some, I think she's from Chile, a book with a wonderful title, Book of Stories called Humiliation.
Wow.
That word came up earlier, by Paulina Flores. I believe she's from Chile. And she's, she's good. And I mostly, though, but I mean, I do so much rereading, and I will just turn it over to Sue in a second, but I have been rereading a story I'm very keen on by, I cannot get her name right. This writer, I want to say Asia Papatya Buchak. She's half Turkish. A story, it's old. It's not old. It's a few years old. It's not brand new.
What's the title?
The History of Girls.
Oh, okay.
The History of Girls. It's online. You can look it up.
Okay, I will. I will.
Made me think of 30 Girls, quite honestly.
Oh, okay.
That's why, yeah, that's what came up. Your, Susan, what about you?
So I am, I read again and again the stories that I teach. Right now I'm teaching a short story class at Stony Brook. And so I read those stories over and over again. And they're just, Flannery O'Connor's Everything That Rises Must Converge, a new story that I hadn't taught before called Islands by Alexander Heyman, which is beautiful, very different kind of story. Edith Wharton, Catherine Mansfield, John Cheever, the sort of short story masters. But then I've also been listening to a lot of books, because I can listen while I walk, I can listen while I'm cooking dinner. And at first I thought, oh, I'm not reading it, it's not. And I thought, no, this is the oldest tradition. This is the oldest tradition of storytelling, is that you listen to it from early on. So I just recently listened to Caste, the Isabel Wilkerson, a history of not just race related, but social relations in America, Caste with an E at the end. It's incredible. And now I'm listening to a book by Wade Davis, who's an anthropologist and historian, called Into the Silence. And it's about the climbing of Mount Everest and the horrible destruction of World War I. And it's so good. And these, geographers going to map, Bhutan and stuff like that. I mean, the English, this sort of horrible, I would say, the sort of distressing colonial kind of attitude that they have. But I find that reading about, reading nonfiction that's sort of looking at the state of our world when it's good is really helpful, as well as reading about, adventurous people doing incredible things, just to keep that spirit in, your sort of heart at this moment, because it's hard. It's hard.
Yes.
It is. But I think this talk helped for sure. I enjoyed it myself.
Well, then that's worth it, Maddie, if that's true.
A huge thank you again to both of you, Susan and Amy, for a wonderful night in. Thanks to all of you out there too for spending your evening with us. You can learn more and purchase tonight's collection, Why I Don't Write, through the link in the chat box. And on behalf of Harvard Bookstore, have a good night, keep reading, and please be well.
Thank you so much. And thank you
you
again, darling Amy.